welcome. In the fifth lecture of 8th week, let us discuss about the various connections between and among these the various climate connection. On one side sustainable development goal number 13 and on the other side rest of the SDGs, that is rest of the 16 SDGs. But we want to say that they means if we achieve something good with respect to one SDG, then perhaps the other one is getting mostly benefited or may be affected. So, let us have an understanding that how this has happened with respect to the climate action, that is sustainable goal number 13. So, to discuss this we will go through these concepts. The concepts are, first is what are the connection. So, how to connect the climate action with other SDGs, and we will talk about the impacts of climate change on achievement of the sustainable development goals. We will talk about the synergies and trade-offs between climate action and the sustainable development goals. We will discuss about the various processes that links between international commitments and climate change as far as the sustainable development goal is concerned. So, these three have been picked from a publications, a recent publication, whereas the fifth one talks about SDG goal number 13, where we discuss about the various prerequisites in terms of achieving all other sustainable development goals in terms of the core synergies and the pros and cons also. So, finally, we will also discuss about all these 17 SDG goals and how climate action is perhaps a kind of central theme out of that. So, this we will discuss towards end. So, first is connecting climate action with other sustainable development goals. The first point is climate change can undermine 16 sustainable development goals, while combating the climate change can reinforce all 17 SDGs by undermining efforts to achieve. So, that means it is crucial, it has connection or connectivity or linkage. So, you do one thing good here, it is reflected somewhere else in terms of other SDGs. And coming to the next point is understanding this relationship requires wider and deeper interdisciplinary collaboration. So, to do this means understanding the relationship between on one hand we have the climate action SDG 13 and on the other side we have rest of the sustainable development goals. Understanding this relationship, it requires very wide and deep interdisciplinary collaboration. The third point what we want to highlight here is the climate changes and the sustainable development governance, they should be better connected to maximize the effectiveness of actions in both the domains. The fourth is emergence around the world of new coordinating institutions and sustainable development planning represents promising progress as far as linkage between or connection between climate actions and other SDGs are concerned. So, let us have a look at the context as far as the connections between SDG 13 on one side and rest of the SDGs. Here we are talking about SDG number 1 to begin with, that deals with no poverty, and 2 which deals with zero hunger. So, the climate driven disasters, hurricanes, droughts etc., they destroy livelihoods and food supplies, thereby hitting the poorest, hardest, and climate action reduces these economic and food security risks. So, what we mean to say in terms of poverty and hunger, here the climate action reduces, you take action in terms of the climate mitigation, in terms of disaster management, adaptation mitigation. So, this action also will lead to improvement in terms of their food security risk and also their economic status. Coming to SDG 3 in terms of the good health and well-being, mitigation improves air quality while adaptation reduces the injuries, deaths and disease outbreaks caused by extreme weathers. So, the good health and well-being, which is under SDG 3, it talks about talks about what you say, various health and well-being related issues. So, if we migrate, that will migration improves the air quality, while adaptation reduces the injuries, deaths and all these things. So, these are also caused by the extreme weather events. So, if we address this through climate change disaster, so this also will be addressed or taken care in terms of good health and well-being. Coming to the third one with respect to the SDG goal number 6, it deals with the clean water and sanitation, or we say the wash sector. Droughts and floods, they degrade water quality and availability. So, if there are these kind of things in which are coming mostly from the climate change point of view, in terms of droughts and floods, they will degrade the water quality and also the availability in terms of quantity. So, climate resilience, if we take up programs that addresses the climate resilience such as water management and similar kind of water harvesting structures and all this, they will secure or assure access to safe water. So, in a sense, if we do or execute it there in terms of climate action in sustainable development goal number 13, our SDG 6 in terms of clean water and sanitation will be benefited. Coming to the seventh one is the affordable and clean energy. Shifting to renewable low carbon energy is central to decarbonization and thereby reduces the emissions. In terms of SDG 13, you can see if we shift the renewable energy as far which is actually falling in terms of climate action, because we need to shift to renewable energies. So, at the cost of non-renewable energy. So, usage of non-renewable energy will be minimized or stopped, and we will shift to the renewable energy, which is also a very low carbon. That means, this will lead to decarbonization and reduction in terms of emission. In a sense, it will comply to the climate action which is under SDG 13. Now, moving on, the SDG 11. SDG 11 talks about the sustainable cities and communities. So, here resilient infrastructure and sustainable transport are very crucial for adapting to sea level rise and reduction in terms of emission. So, this is important because if we create resilient infrastructure and sustainable means of sustainable transport, this will help in terms of adapting to the sea level rise, which is a concern under the climate action or the SDG 13, and also reduction in emission will also happen, which is also we are taking care or we are bothered in terms of the climate action. So, taking care of the resilient infrastructure and sustainable transport under SDG 11 is also taking care of the adaptation to sea level rise and reduction in emission, which is one main goal under the SDG 13, that is on climate action. Moving on is SDG 14, that talks about life below water, and 15 is life on land. So, actions like reforestation and marine protection, they boost the carbon sequestration while protecting the biodiversity. So, this kind of means what you say actions, if we go for more of a reforestation or plantation, or even if protecting the marine species. So, that means we are taking care of the life or the biota below and above water. So, if we do that, that means if we are storing more of this, that means we are contributing to carbon sequestration. We are also protecting our biodiversity. So, 14, 15, ensuring the compliance of 14 and 15 or achieving the target of goal number 14 and 15 also help in partly achieving the target of SDG 13. Coming to SDG 17, which talks about partnerships for the goals. The Paris Agreement, it very well mentioned that the that similar frameworks require global cooperation to finance and technology transfer to deal with climate action. As far as Paris agreement is concerned, we need cooperation, we need partnership, because there is a requirement of finance flow, and there is also requirement of technology transfer so as to realize the benefit of climate action and to realize the sustainable development goal targets. So, 17 realizing the partnership for the goals also complies or partly complies with respect to the SDG 13. So, these are the main connection with respect to SDG 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 11, 14 and 17 as far as the climate action is concerned with respect to SDG 13. Now, have a look at these depictions. This talks about the impacts of climate change on the achievement of the SDGs. Here all the SDGs have been shown here and the corresponding indicators. So, different SDGs have different number of indicators and annexures. So, as far as the first one, no poverty, is concerned, we have 5 indicators and all of them have a red mark. So, that means red talks about the evidence of climate change impacts. So, it has been observed that all those 5 indicators of SDG 1, that is no poverty, have evidently what you say impacted by climate change, whereas the one A means that there is no evidence, but there is impact, whereas B is it is evidently established that there is impact as far as the no poverty is concerned. Moving on to the number 2, that is about zero hunger. In terms of zero hunger, we can see that all the 5 indicators, it is under black, it is under red mark. That means evidence of climate change impact is there, whereas AB shows that there is perhaps no evidence, but impact is there, whereas C is evidence is already established. Similarly, the third one that has 4 boxes or indicators, the first 4 indicators are filled, whereas the rest 5 are not filled. So, that means we have evidence for the first 4, whereas for the last 5 we do not have, including the 4 annexures A, B, C, D. Moving on to SDG goal number 4, we have similarly 1, 2 and 5, whereas for the goal number 5 we have 1, 2, 5 and A, B and C. So, similarly for the SDG goal number 6, we have indicators 1, 2, 4 and 6 are loaded with our already having evidence as far as the impacts from climate change is concerned. Similarly, the 7th one we only have 2 where the impacts of climate change is evident. For the for the 9th one, for the 8th one, we have several out of the 10, 1, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 8, 9, 10, all these are really evident. Coming to goal number 9, only first one have evidence, whereas the rest we do not have evidence, but that does not mean that there is no impact, there are impacts. And coming to the 10th one, we have 1, 2 and 6, 7. 11th it is 1, 2, 5 and coming to 12 it is 1, 2. Now, more interestingly, if it is the self one, that is SDG goal number 13 itself, you can see all. So, there are evidences of climate change impacts for all, including 1, 2, 3 and also A and B, those 2 annexures. Moving on to life on land and below water, 14, 15, we have evidences from 1, 2, 3, 4 and 7 and A, B, whereas for life below water it is for all 6, first 6 and 8, whereas evidence is not there for the 7th indicator. And moving on to the 15th one, for the 16th one is 14, 15 and 16th one, we have only evidence for 1 and 7, whereas for the 17th one that talks about the justice and all this partnership, their partnership issues, we do not have lot many evidences, but impact is found. So, what we try to understand from here that the impacts of climate change on achievement of these SDG indicators, which are mentioned in terms of boxes on the right hand side, is very clear. So, we have impacts. So, climate change or climate action, that is SDG 13, has impacts on achievement of other sustainable development goals. So, it is critical. Now, in a sense of synergies and trade-off, let us discuss about the synergies and trade-off between climate action and the SDGs. So, similarly, all the 17 SDGs are put forth here, and we now have various colors in terms of dark margin, what you say, orange to orange and faint orange, and we have in between the consistent, that means no evidence, and on the right hand side bottom I am talking about, we have 3 colors in terms of green, faint, medium green and dense green in terms of enabling, reinforcing and indivisible, whereas on the right hand side we have cancelling, counteracting and constraining as far as different color gradations or depth is concerned, as far as magenta, sorry, the orange color is there. But let us have a look at this. These colors in terms of various indicators of all the 17 sustainable development goals, whereas means where it is the orange gradations, they talk about the trade off, where it is green gradation they talk about the synergy. And if we notice it clearly that many of them are talking about synergy, but in different gradations in terms of enabling, reinforcing and indivisible, and whereas in terms of the orange box field, we have relatively lesser boxes or indicators field that talks about the cancelling, countering and constraining in terms of the synergies and trade off between climate action and other SDGs. We will take the example of our 13th one, where you say all the boxes are filled and filled with the dark green, that means it is indivisible in terms of synergies and trade off between climate action and SDGs. Coming to the first one, that is the poverty or no poverty, we see that 1, 2 and 4, 5 is heavily filled, but whereas 1 to 4 there it is reinforcing in terms of the synergy is concerned, whereas the in terms of the second part where it is talking about the trade off, we can see the 2 and 4 are having a medium level in terms of counteracting trade off. So, likewise we can discuss, we can try to understand for rest of this in terms of synergies, and each rectangle to the right of the relevant SDGs represents a target. The highlighting portions represent the strength of an interaction in terms of scale is explained. The absence of highlighting indicates the absence of identified evidence. Now, friends, let us move on to the processes, the process that links between international commitments and climate change. So, these two these two part of the graphics talks about the process that links between international commitment and climate change, so as to realize the sustainable development goal targets. So, on the left hand side you can see the within the outer box we have mentioned 2030 agenda. As we know, the sustainable development goal targets needs to be realized or targeted to be realized by end of this decade. So, that is why it is agenda 2030. So, national sustainable development strategies we have, and in terms of Addis Ababa action agenda, various financial measures are also have come up that came from the last COP event. COP, as all of us know, is the conference of Addis. Other agreements, for example, the Sendai Framework and Convention on Biological Diversity, Paris Agreement, particularly nationally determined contributions. And on the right hand side, the grey washed circle talks about national coordinating strategies for climate change and sustainable development goal in terms of specific national policy domains. So, what happens, the circles represent the overlapping subject matter scope of each of the commitments. For example, the scope of 2030 agenda includes climate change SDG 13, which is the principal focus of the 2015 Paris Agreement. So, these processes are linked, and that leads to realization of the international commitments on the climate change for achieving SDG targets. Now, we we again want to discuss this with respect to the core synergies. So, splitting them or reorienting or discussing them with respect to the core synergy as far as the SDG goal 13 is concerned. So, SDG 13 is considered as the keystone goal here, particularly in this lecture, because its success is a prerequisite for achieving almost all other SDGs. Over 80% of all SDG targets are directly linked to climate action. It is really important because 80% of all SDG targets are directly linked to climate action. Coming to the core synergies in terms of positive interlinkage, climate action typically creates co-benefits where progress in one area accelerates other. So, let us see how one is accelerating other in terms of co-benefits. We start here with SDG 7 in terms of the positive interlinkage based on their contribution. So, SDG 13, SDG 7 which is about clean energy, it talks about transitioning to renewables is the primary driver for reducing emissions while ensuring energy security. It is really important because if we transition from non-renewable to renewable, that means we are into clean sector, clean energy. So, we through this we achieve, or it is a very positive interlinkage as far as SDG 13 is concerned. Next, as we have already discussed in terms of health, which is SDG 13. So, let us say we stop or decrease the fossil fuel burning, that means we stop air pollution. We directly lower the mortality from the respiratory or cardiovascular diseases. So, if we take care of the SDG 30, SDG number 3, that means it will have positive interlinkage or core synergy as far as the SDG 13 is concerned. So, 3 is linked to 13. Coming to 14 and 15 in terms of life, preserving or conserving life below water and on the land. So, it talks about protecting ecosystems like mangrove and forests that create natural carbon sinks while preserving biodiversity. So, this carbon sink, or you say higher carbon sequestration, is in a sense reduction of atmospheric carbon dioxide or removal of atmospheric carbon dioxide. So, that way it is synchronized, or it gives or derives synergy with respect to the SDG 13. Moving on to SDG 11, which talks about the sustainable cities. Integrating climate adaptation into urban planning will protects the infrastructure from extreme weather and rising sea level. So, if we take care of the cities in terms of a sustainable way, that means in a sense we are integrating the climate adaptation into urban planning. So, that helps. And as already discussed in terms of SDG 3 in terms of the zero hunger, if climate resilient agriculture is promoted, that essentially also safeguards the food system in terms of drought and flood. So, these are the core synergies, or you say the positive interlinkages between SDG 13 on one hand, SDG 7, 3, 14, 15, 11 and 2 on the other hand. Now, let us look at the risks and trade-offs. So, what are the prerequisites for achieving all other SDGs risk and trade-offs in terms of the structural interdependencies. So, the risk and trade-offs, if poorly planned, the condition, if it is poorly planned, then the climate actions can negatively impact other goals. SDG 2 and SDG 15 talks about what you say zero hunger, and 15 talks about life above land or terrestrial, or life on land. So, here what happens, large scale of bioenergy projects may compete with food production. So, this is the risk. If we go for lot of what you say switching to energy in terms of bioenergy, so more of the bioenergy projects, it will compete with the food production for land, or it will lead to deforestation if not managed substantially. So, we need to maintain a balance between this. So, there is a risk. So, we need to have a trade off. So, it has to be optimized in terms of the bioenergy projects for the projects for bioenergy generation, energy generation from bioenergy based plants, and on the other side with respect to food production. And the SDG 10th that talks about inequalities. So, the climate policies like carbon tax can be disproportionately burden the poor unless accompanied by social safety nets. So, there could be inequality. The person or the poor who cannot afford to other basic amenities in terms of getting 2 prime meals or food for their daily livelihood and other things, if the carbon tax or the climate tax is also imposed to them, then it will be difficult. So, that is how we need to deal in a different way in terms of the social safety nets. We need to protect them from this kind of taxes, otherwise it will be an extra burden to them. The SDG 8 that talks about the decent work. The transition away from fossil fuels requires just transition strategies to ensure workers in high carbon industries are not left behind. So, what happens? The term just transition is extremely important. So, that means we let us say for an example, you are working in a heavy carbon based or high carbon based industries. Now, you are immediately moving to a low carbon based industry. So, because of this transition or because of this immediate or the just transition, we should also ensure that the the people who are working, their livelihood is not getting affected. They should be trained, they should be allowed to shift to that. So, these things also has to be taken care, which might happen in a mode of just transition when we move from one to other to safeguard the climate action or to safeguard the climate or to restore the climate. We might move from one to other in a fashion of just transition, but that point we need to ensure that other things are not affected badly, including the livelihood of the workers. Now, coming to the third point that talks about the structural interdependencies. So, SDG 4 in terms of education, SDG 1 in terms of no poverty, and SDG 14 in terms of deriving the partnerships. So, SDG 13.3 explicitly links to target 4.7 in terms of focusing on mainstreaming climate change education and incorporating them into the national curriculum to build long term capacity. So, there is a kind of structural interdependency. So, this education we are addressing there in 13.3 and also in SDG 4.7. So, there is a interdependency. Similarly, what we have discussed in terms of the target 13.1, that is climate related disasters are a major driver of poverty, that also strengthens the resilience, but is also vital to protecting the livelihood of the most of the vulnerable population. So, this one 13.1 is also interdependent with respect to SDG 1. Coming to the third one in terms of the partnership, SDG 13, achieving means the targeted money or the fund in terms of annual finance target relies entirely on international cooperation and private public private public partnership. So, 17 will be realized if 17 is realized, then target 13A of climate action is realized. So, that is the interdependency. So, if the international cooperation and private public partnership is realized, then it will comply to 13A that talks about the arrangement of climate finance. So, these are the three sets in terms of the core functioning, that means the benefits, the risk and trade off, and the third is the interdependencies. So, with this we are linking to linking the connectivity as far as the goal number 13, that means climate action is concerned, with all other sustainable development goal targets. As we have mentioned, SDG, if the climate action in terms of SDG 13 is realized to its 100% level, then perhaps 80% of all other SDG targets could be realized. So, that means this is very important as far as the connectivity of realization of the maximum benefit coming from the climate action in form of SDG goal number 13. Now, moving on, we have taken help of these references to prepare the slides and the documents. So, to conclude, we discussed how to connect or how climate action is connected to other sustainable development goals. We also tried to understand the impacts of climate change on the achievement of other sustainable development goal targets in terms of evidence and without evidence, but for sure there is an impact. We also talked about, or we also discussed about the synergies and trade-offs between climate action and the sustainable development goals. The process links between international commitments and climate change to realize the sustainable development we tried to see, and tried to understand that how this linkage helps in realizing the Agenda 2030. Coming to the prerequisites, we talked about various core synergies, the trade-off and risks, and also the interdependencies. They are really so important to connect climate action with other SDGs, and this, if we can achieve, then the United Nations Agenda 2030 can be very well achieved. So, friends, in this week number 8, we discussed about the sustainable development goal target number 13. We first discussed what are in the lecture 1, we discussed what are the various sustainable development goals, and emphasized and tried to carve out the sustainable development goal number 13 from there. In the subsequent 2 lectures, lecture 2 and 3, we elaborately discussed on sustainable development goal target 13.1, subsequently 13.2, and discussed about various organizations, agencies, and their functionaries. In the lecture 4, we discuss about SDG 13.3 along with the other 2 annexures A and B, and the last one, particularly the today's class, we talked about the lecture number 5, we talked about the connection of SDG 13, that is on climate action, with all other sustainable development goal targets, and we realized that it is one of the core areas or core SDGs, and if this can be realized, then perhaps it can also cater to realization of up to 80% of other SDG actions, sustainable development goal targets. So, understanding the sustainable development goal target number 13, that is on climate action, is really very important, and if we really understand it and then try to realize or try to follow the path of adaptation and mitigation, then the best fruit or the better things can be done as far as the SDG 13, that is climate action, is concerned. Thank you very much.